So photosynthesis happens in two stages. We have the light reactions, multiple there, and the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is sometimes called the dark reactions, Rx for reaction. Not that it needs darkness, but that it doesn't require light. The light reactions require light. So the light reactions, this is in the thylakoid membranes, so those sacs, right? And this is where we take chemical energy and oxygen, sorry, to chemical, sorry, light is converted into, just read the words, Marianne. So we have the water being split to make the oxygen. Now, I haven't talked anything about CO2 yet. That's part of the Calvin cycle. So the two main things that go in would be the water goes into these light reactions, and the carbon dioxide goes into the Calvin cycle. Those are the two main reactants in the process of photosynthesis. So other than the water being split and oxygen being made, we also have these. These are all intermediates. So like I said, we've done the heavy lifting in chapter 6 where we had electron carriers. We have a different one now. And we also had that concept of things being produced now for later stages of the process. So the light reactions, there are actually two of them. Photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and they happen out of order, mostly because photosystem 1 was actually discovered before photosystem 2. So we can have photosystem 1 and comes after photosystem 2. Silly scientists should have held back on naming those until they understood everything. And then we also have some key things here. So I'm just going to draw your attention to some key things that echo back to our discussion of cellular respiration. So we have an electron transport chain kind of happening in reverse. And we also have this chemiosmosis. We have ATP synthase making our ATP. So the key things going in here, as a reminder, is we have the light energy and oxygen going in. We're going to have ATP and electron carriers coming out. And we've also got, there is the oxygen that's coming out right in there. So do you remember how sneaky it was in the production of water in the electron transport chain of cellular respiration? This is that sneaky production of the oxygen. And so we've got some similarities here. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the specifics of the two photosystems, but really look at these as an overall. Okay, so the Calvin cycle is going to use that other reactant, this CO2. This one's now outside the thylakoid in the stroma. So remember, that's that fluid-filled part of the chloroplast. And here, those intermediates are used up with the carbon dioxide to make glucose, or technically any sugar. The key process here is carbon fixation. So we talked about carbon and the study of carbon molecules being organic chemistry. This is where carbon is switched to an organic molecule. And so this is key. This is when you clean out your garden at this time of year. I've always thought that, oh, I'm pulling all the good soils out. Well, no, those plants grew by taking carbon dioxide out of the air and making it into the plant molecules. So like I'd said here before, the Calvin cycle is often called the dark or the light independent reaction because it doesn't need light, but it doesn't necessarily need darkness either. So I love this picture. On your review pages for this chapter, I've given you this blank. So we have the light reactions in the thylakoid. The water goes in, the oxygen comes out. This is where that light is going in because they're the light reactions. We have the intermediates being produced and they feed into the Calvin cycle. So the Calvin cycle is in the stroma outside the thylakoids in that fluid-filled part of our chloroplasts. And this is where the carbon goes in and is fixed into organic molecules. So most plants that we encounter are G3 plants, and they make this simple sugar that then can be used in cellular respiration in the plants, because plants can photosynthesize and produce and undergo cellular respiration. They have mitochondria as well as chloroplasts. Maybe the plants make that into that structural polysaccharide or that energy storage polysaccharide. Glycogen is in here because that was the energy storage polysaccharide in animals, right? And it could be other organic compounds that are derived from this beginning product that is what photosynthesis actually makes. So I love that image. It really summarizes the key players, what's going in, what's going out, and the two processes that are photosynthesis. You know, same as in cellular respiration, if you can have a framework for this, then you can put more details in, like with photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, but figuring out the lay of the land, figuring out where the key players are going in and the key players are coming out, I think is a good framework to start with. So like we said, all life relies on photosynthesis. Even if you don't photosynthesize, you need things out there in the world photosynthesizing. It's really important that we have these food making machinery of photosynthesis. And so remember that plants can make more food that they need. And so this is why we eat plants. You know, the starch was put into the potato for the potato plant. We just happen to eat it. So like I said, most plants in our world are C3 plants. That C3 molecule I put in here, I can never remember what these are. So that's the molecule of C3. Other plants are C4 or CAM plants, which are adaptations to mitigate this kind of double-edged sword of having the stomata open so that lots of gases can be exchanged, but also not losing too much water. So the next bit is adaptations that are prevalent in the world. So if we have hot weather, the stomata are going to close to reduce that water loss. So what happens then is that there's two things. We aren't going to have CO2 coming in, right? Because the pores are closed, and we're going to end up with too much oxygen. So the oxygen is going to build up, and it can actually build up to problematic levels. So it's the opposite of when we have carbon dioxide building up and we're starved for oxygen. Plants can be starved for carbon dioxide and have too much oxygen. So when they have too much oxygen, plants undergo this other biochemical process called photorespiration. So it uses up the oxygen, which is great, but it doesn't actually get them anywhere. So it makes a 2-carbon compound, not sugar, in this process of photorespiration. So photorespiration is somewhat good that it uses up the oxygen, but energetically it's not helpful or it's bad because it doesn't make any sugar. It produces no ATP. So basically, you know, it's starving the plant cells. So to avoid photorespiration, plants have come up with ways of managing their molecules so that they don't have to default to this photorespiration process. So the two ways are C4 and CAM. So remember, most plants are C3 plants, and that's sort of the regular process. But when we have hot, dry climates, these adaptations have evolved. So the C4 plants work when the stomata are closed. They're going to take the carbon dioxide and fix it. They're going to stockpile it into a 4-carbon compound. That's where the C4 comes in. And so this prevents the photorespiration or the oxygen fixing, right? That is problematic. And these C4 molecules that they make are like the stockpile. So that can supply the carbon dioxide to the Calvin cycle. And so it can keep things going. So sort of like when we talked about respiration and we talked about fermentation, either lactic acid fermentation or alcohol fermentation, this is kind of the make do for plant cells. And so C4 molecules can feed into the Calvin cycle to make sugars. We've got about 3% of plants, and there's definitely plants that you know of. Grasses work this way, corn, sugarcane are all plants that work as C4 plants. We'll come back to the images here because that's both of the adaptations. The last adaptation is CAM plants. So CAM stands for another, it's an acronym. I'm not even going to say it. So CAM plants are pineapples and cacti, succulents, those kinds of things. And again, with them, they're going to take and instead they'll open their stomata only at night. And so these are day-night things. So in a desert system or a desert environment, they can open up their stomata at night when it's cooler, and so the carbon dioxide can enter then. And again, it's going to stockpile this time into a 4-carbon compound like the C4 plants, but it's a different molecule. And so this molecule down here is crassulacean acid, is that molecule. And so again, it's banking the CO2. But this is a day-night thing. So here we have the two images. So the carbon dioxide can come in and both of them fix it into some kind of a stockpile, which then provides the carbon dioxide to go into the Calvin cycle. And so in this way, they're preventing photorespiration. The C4 plants like grass or corn can do this all 24 hours a day, but those cacti or succulents are night and day. And so they only do this during the day and they can open their stomata at night. So the last little part is about like the global contribution of photosynthesis. And I think that I put these slides in here. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't include them, but I also think that we're pretty acutely aware of the contribution of plants and the overall balance that we have. Most people taking this course have an interest in going into environmental sciences or forestry or something like that. And you know, this global effect is pretty pertinent to you. So the greenhouse effect and carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases are part of the topic of photosynthesis because we've got photosynthesis to mitigate our carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. And so climate change is a big part. And so carbon-based fuels, fossil-based fuels produce more carbon dioxide, and we need more plants to photosynthesize and use this